Perverse. It's an adjective usually describing an individual that has obstinate desires to behave in a way that's considered to be unacceptable in spite of any consequences. Apply that word into the world of punk music, and more than likely the first person that would come to mind is G.G. Allin. But that's not who I'm here to do a video on. Because no disrespect to G.G. Allin, which I don't think that's really even possible considering how insane this fucking guy was, but while I do find the person G.G. Allin and all of his antics and all the things he did physically to be perverse, I never felt like his music was perverse. Yes, it was lowbrow. Yes, it was a guy basically having themes about his wild antics against the world, basically, regardless if you look at his punk material to his country material. It all kind of had that attitude towards it. It never gave me this feeling of, wow, I feel wrong listening to this. The band in question that I consider to be the most perverse in punk is an obscure name that has somewhat of a cult-like fan base from Hudskval, Sweden, Brain Bombs. Now, for those who are unaware, Brain Bombs is a Swedish noise rock band that formed back in 1985 and have remained active ever since. Right off the bat, I feel like I do need to address the elephant in the room for all the individuals that really keep an uptight standard on terms of music genres, because I know I just stated Brain Bombs are a noise rock band, and in this video I'm considering them to be, with the title, the most perverse punk band. The reason for that is not only just the music that Brain Bombs has, but their presentation, aesthetic, and even inspiration is heavily tied to punk. Take, for example, their band name, Brain Bombs. It comes from a single from a UK post-punk band, Punishment of Luxury, from their 1979 EP called Secrets. In it has a single called Brain Bomb. Even though they are playing post-punk, with this particular single over here by Punishment of Luxury, it's way more rooted in the realms of punk rock music, because they really play quite fast and aggressive for 1979 standards. Then also take into account the Brain Bombs guitarist, Lanchy. At the same time when Brain Bombs was starting in the mid-80s, he was also a part of a hardcore punk band called Totalitar. So even though they're labeled to be a noise rock band, there's no denying that they have a strong punk influence integrated into their sound. But that's all the basic information, so to say, that's really more normal about them, because everything else I'll be talking about when the discussion's brought up about Brain Bombs, this is where we get into the perverse territory of them. Because if you were to listen to any Brain Bombs material, immediately you're going to be hit with themes such as murder, violence, torture, drug addiction, rape, and this very grim and ultra blunt presentation that almost feels like as if it's trying to depict this true crime scenario. I'm very aware for some people that might not be really all that eye-opening anymore, considering the fact that there have been so many different forms of media out there depicting these themes that it's almost like as if we're becoming more desensitized to it. However, what makes Brain Bombs so unique for this situation, or should I say how they really get under my skin here, is that their lyrics on how they depict all of these themes are heavily influenced by Peter Sodas. I've talked about Peter Sodas once before here on my channel with my most disturbing albums that I know, with his incredibly infamous release, Buyer's Market, which, I'll just state it here, it's the only thing, I'm not even going to call it an album, it's the only thing ever in my life to make me cry out of complete disgust. Other than that, in regards to Peter Sodas, he's mostly known for being a part of the group White House, big pioneers to that of noise and power electronics for a handful of years from the early 80s all the way up until the early 2000s, and he was an author, and I believe he still is. He's written a handful of novels, but his most known piece of work happens to be a magazine titled Pure, which I'm not going to showcase here on the internet, but From what I've searched up, because I've never read it, nor do I want to, it has themes to do with the point of view of a sexual predator, sadomasochism, and other forms of child... yeah. The issues for Pure were published between the years of 1984 to 1986, and it garnished just enough attention by not only individual people buying it, but also the police. So much so that when the police had a search warrant for Peter Sotos, they came across that he had possession of child. From my understanding, the reason for Peter Sotos having possession of this was because it would to be used for the publications of all of his books that he was writing, that it was more used for like artistic purposes, which, okay, I understand that, but it's still an incredibly touchy subject that it's like you're playing with fire here, like to the worst extent, and he got burnt for it. It's also quite crazy to consider the fact too that if you were to search up who is the first individual to be arrested in the United States for the ownership of child, it would be Peter Sotos. I don't want to dwell any longer talking about Peter Sotos here, but if you want a deeper cut and more information all about this subject matter, I would strongly recommend watching this video done by RamtroStudios that he uploaded a handful of years ago, all about buyer's market and the profile of Peter Sotos. That's done very well, so I'll have a link in the description to where you can check that video out. The reason I bring all this up though with Peter Sotos' writing is because it's a huge reason as to why I consider to be Brain Bombs as the most perverse punk band, because when you take into factor all of the just vicious, vile, and just ultra blunt Peter Sotos is with his depictions of violence and all this perverse stuff, is what Brain Bombs bases their lyrical themes off of very strongly. Now, Brain Bombs has a pretty large discography, but the album that I'm going to be primarily focusing on, and I think it's a huge reason as to why they're even known, is their third full-length album from 1996, Obey. In terms of lyrical themes, this album really isn't that much different from everything they've done before and after. However, what makes this album quite the standout from everything else that they've done is really this is their only album that you can clearly hear what the vocalist is saying. And good God, sometimes I really wish I couldn't have the ability to hear it. Because with the other albums, the vocal performance is done in this very screechy kind of scream that gets really raspy in terms of execution, that when you hear it, if you really pay attention, maybe you can hear like a few choruses or a certain, vocal line here, but it kind of gets lost in the mix that you really don't pay attention to it all that much. Whereas on the album Obey, the vocals are done more in vein of just talking, kind of like the same way I've been talking throughout this video, other than the fact that the way he pronounces his words has more of like this grody, rugged type of filter attached to how he pronounces everything. An example I can give you of this is from the song Lipstick on My Dick, and it goes, "The police came and took me in, investigate, visitate, and said, 'You sick fuck, you have lipstick on your dick.'" What's crazy is that's probably like the most tamed verse throughout the whole album, because there's almost like a sense of this black comedy kind of oozing from it, considering the fact that he did this heinous crime, but the cops are more disgusted by the fact that he has lipstick on his genitals. To say the lyrics of Brain Bombs' Obey is shocking is an understatement, because holy hell, like, you hear this stuff and they repeat it so freaking much that it's equivalent to that of, think of any movie that you consider to be ultra disturbing, and think of that one scene that really messes you up. It's almost like as if Brain Bombs wants to replay that scene for you over and over again, that it becomes the only thing you can remember from it. Which is the other feature about them too. Their lyrics are so incredibly blunt with how they depict these heinous things that it doesn't really leave any room to the imagination. At this point you're now thinking, why am I making a video about a group that just disgusts me out through just lyrical themes? What's its selling point other than just being, disturbed by its lyrical content? And I've always wondered for a while now, why am I returning to this album over and over again? Why am I listening to it so much? Why is it when I read, fan reviews about Brain Bombs, they just talk about how they listen to their, material over and over again? And I think it all has to do, when it comes to the instrumentation, just how simplistic it is. One thing you'll notice whenever you see a review about Brain Bombs is that the way they construct guitar riffs, drum patterns, and just their overall music writing it's incredibly repetitive. No exaggeration, there's quite a handful of songs on this album and other works in their discography where they will play the same 3 to 4 chords throughout the entirety of songs that run for 3 to 5 minutes long. This straightforward songwriting approach that they have kind of gives it its charm when you consider the fact that their production value is extremely amateurish, because these instruments just sound so unsanitary. There is so much distortion that it's brittle and ultra harsh to the eardrums that it's just so rackiness to your senses, I feel like. And it's just so weird that they have this simplistic approach that's also very abrasive, but they just become like earworms. There's just enough of a hook that you can understand it, though, I guess, with how they write their guitar riffs, that it's just so easy to get addicted to by the simplicity that they give off. Along with the fact that there's another member that they have that specifically plays the trumpet, but it is nothing fancy, as it's more done in this improv way to just give off another layer of this nauseating, droning type of sound, just spread out far and wide whenever it's played alongside all these noise rock and punk rock types of instrumentation. I think a huge reason as to why people admire Brain Bomb's approach with their songwriting, even though it's incredibly simplistic and again pretty amateurish on the production value sense, is that Brain Bombs themselves, the band, even though they're a noise rock band and they have a strong punk rock aesthetic with their songwriting, is they themselves seem to find interest and influence to that on noise music. They kind of bring the ideas of the transitions, the textures, the unorthodox approach that noise music is onto punk rock music. Thus, again, you admire the simplicity but incredibly abrasive nature of it all. As for the individual members of Brain Bombs, reading interviews and watching the one interview that they, I think, did in terms of the video format that you can watch here on YouTube, is that their overall attitude towards everything, from the lyrical content, inspiration, their plans to do tours or shows, is they just really don't seem to give a fuck at all. Like, yeah, they want to make music that they enjoy, that is known, but in terms of any controversy, the implications of what they are, showcasing with their lyrics that, again, are pretty controversial and very touchy, it's like everything of their attitude and demeanor from what I read of them is they just really don't seem to care. And maybe it's just they're edgy for the sake of it, for some type of act, or they're just overall really like this in person. Again, I've never really met them and I don't know them, but I feel like this just adds to the incredibly perverse nature that makes Brain Bombs who they are. In conclusion for this video, Brain Bombs are somewhat of this pseudo-enigma in music. Yes, there are interviews out there that you can hear about Brain Bombs, but it's really just surface level information. There's really no deep cut as to what really ticks about them other than just some inspirations, and really they only seem to make music because they want to make music that they enjoy and that's really it. They just want to move on to the next thing when it's done. As for live shows, they're really few and far between. They only seem to want to do shows inside of their home country or the surrounding countries in the Scandinavian area. And it was quite a big deal for them to play in Paris, France a handful of years ago for them. As for the appeal of Brain Bombs, for me personally anyway, they're a band that really doesn't hold back any punches. Sure, you can say it's just really edgy, perverse music and that's it, but to be just so incredibly blunt with it, to have these, instrumentation that is incredibly harsh and kind of matches just the unforgiving tone of what they're portraying with their lyrics. I've just never had any band kind of disturb me, but also entertain me so much and so equally with really any of the material that you can hear by them. And that'll do it for this video, guys. I'll leave links provided to where you can listen to Obey in its entirety, and that is that. So like always, guys, make sure you guys drink plenty of water to stay hydrated, and have a great day.